Mobile Suit Gundam, The Witch from Mercury. Yeah, we're going to be talking about this one again. To be fair, though, I haven't spoken about Gundam in about a month, which is a new record, so I kind of needed a break. I'm really happy with how our series on the 1-Year War came out, but technically it's not done. We still got to do a deep dive on the original series, which I am working on slowly but surely. Today, though, we're talking about The Witch from Mercury. So the last time I talked about this series was the Season 1 finale, where a Tanuki showed us all how to make ketchup. By the time this video comes out, we'll probably be closer to the halfway point of Season 2, assuming that they're doing a 12-episode season format again. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about was, first, the show itself, and then second, talk about what people are trying to turn the show into. I feel like the former needs to be discussed just because I'm a Gundam fan who likes talking about Gundam. The latter of the two needs to be discussed because it's actually a microcosm of Japan's relations with the United States and how our cultures could end up clashing in the future, and how I don't want them to clash. Now, I need to mention that there will be spoilers in this, so if you haven't watched the series and are curious about it, I've recommended it thus far, and my opinion really hasn't changed much. But let's go ahead and get to part 1 with the details. Suletta's Ketchup Factory. So, when we last left our favorite Tanuki, she was saving the life of her friend and quote-unquote betrothed, Miarina Rembrandt, and her wounded father and president of their government, Delling Rembrandt, who's a pile of trash. By the way, I am accepting no other interpretation of this scene because the dude attacking them was 100% willing, not only to kill Delling, who does deserve to die, by the way, but his innocent daughter as well for just being there. Now, I can understand being horrified by the sight of a blood-covered Suletta taking this all in stride. That I can get. But that dude needed to die, or Miarina would be dead. In fact, I don't think there's a single Gundam pilot out there who wouldn't kill the guy, or at least stop him with extreme prejudice and bodily harm if they had as little time to act as Suletta did. Except for Kira Yamato. He tried to give some speech about how fighting is meaningless, and by the time that he's done with his speech, Miarina and Delling would be dead and full of holes, and Gundam Seed would still suck copious amounts of ass! No, I'm not stopping! Anyway, since then, Miarina and Suletta haven't interacted with one another. Miarina's been watching over her father, and Suletta is still dueling at the academy. However, since then, the war between Earth and space has started to boil over. Gul Jaturk, who had left the school and in the attack on the plant at the end of Season 1 ended up killing his father, is now on Earth himself and in a very bad way. By the way, I'm of the opinion that the episode that was focused on what's going on with Earth and Gul was the best episode of the current season so far, though admittedly the one that follows it is really good too. But the big reason I loved it is because it did a great job of fleshing out what's going on Earth, plus the mobile suit combat was really cool. But anyway, at this point, war crimes have begun! The two Gundams from Earth got into the school and managed to kidnap Shadiq's adoptive father, who was the acting president. With the conflict starting to spread, Suletta Mercury unveils to Miarina the truth about her father. Basically that her dad is responsible for the death of Prospera's husband and all of her friends on top of her mentor. She also unveils the final goal of Quiet Zero. Now, this is the big spoilery reveal. I just gave a summation of every episode of the most recent season up to this point really quickly. So, last warning, dudes. Okay. I'm assuming everyone who didn't want to be spoiled isn't here. So, the ultimate goal that Prospera has is called Quiet Zero, just like I mentioned. It was originally something that Delling Rembrandt wanted to pursue to, quote-unquote, end war and conflict. Now, knowing Delling like we know him as a character, it was likely something that would bring the world underneath his heel, because the guy's a tyrant. Prospera's goal seems to be a little simpler, to get revenge for what happened to her family, but also to be reunited with her daughter. Now, that might sound like a weird sort of thing if you haven't been watching this up to this point, but trust me, if you're coming here after watching it up to this point, I'm going to explain this. Here's the thing. Hints of everything were all in the prologue. And if you watched it, which a lot of people didn't seem to, or at least didn't pay attention, you would notice that there is a point where Eri was able to speak to the Gundam Ilfrith. And she was completely synced with the system, to the point where she could pilot the Gundam with her mind rather easily, almost treating combat like a point-and-click game. Now, this was a machine type that is known for killing pilots for using it too long or using it with too intense of what's called a permet score, which is basically your sync with the data of the machine. Now, everyone assumed that Suletta is a teenage Aerie, and rightfully so. There's a good reason to assume that, because you would think that because Prospera Mercury changed her name to Prospera Mercury, that she would change the name of her daughter as well. You know, the logic is pretty easy to follow. Not to mention, both Aerie and Suletta seem like the same person by looking at them. If we compare their faces, which we'll do now, they have the same eyebrows, they have the same hair color, they have the same skin tone, they have the same eye color. They're also the spitting image of Prospera before Prospera grew her hair out and dyed it brown and put on the mask. Thing is, there was a clue staring us in the face when it came to whether or not Suletta and Aerie were the same person. When Aerie hooked up into the Gundam Ilfrith, her body lit up with blue like any other Gund format user had up to that point. Suletta doesn't. In fact, she doesn't even hook into the mobile suit at all. That's because the mobile suit has a mind of its own. It is Aerie, thus the name Ariel. We'll put the bold on 3 specific letters there to make it obvious. Essentially, Aerie's body couldn't survive the harshness of space. So Prospera had to convert her biometric code into the mobile suit to serve as a new body, letting her live on as this Gundam. Now, what I love about this is twofold. First is that this is sort of a throwback to mobile suits like Wing Zero, Epion, the S Gundam, and more than any of them, the Blue Destiny, in the sense that there's an AI or another consciousness inside the suit that aids the main pilot. Now, to my recollection, we haven't seen something like this in the franchise since the late 90s, early 2000s. The Gundam Kimaris Vidar kind of had elements of it too, but it's a little different. Point being, it's pretty cool for me as a longtime fan to see something like this touched on again, but also take it in a much more extreme direction. It's also interesting because if you look back at things, you could make the argument that Ariel, if you've been paying attention up to this point, has a personality herself. That's honestly something I hope they explore more of, the Gundam as a actual character, because there are hints at it. Plus, I mean, she's apparently pretty good at synchronized dance. Okay, all jokes aside, from what Prospera said, if they reach a permet score of 8, then her daughter, Aerie, will truly be free. Now, what that means, I'm not sure. But my mind is sort of going into a sort of digital version of the afterlife where all souls become data and then become one, and everyone is at peace, so to speak. It's at this point you start to realize that the whole thing about this being the Gundam version of Revolutionary Girl Utena was largely a red herring. This is like taking Gundam and the end of Evangelion and putting them together as a mecha sandwich, with the LCL and Quiet Zero as our peanut butter and jelly. And honestly, I'm all here for it. You see, this show has become very, very Gundam at this point, and I'm just down with all of it. It was always hiding beneath the surface, with all the school hijinks and duels really just kind of serving to set up the people that the show was going to screw with as the whole dance goes on, because that's Gundam for you. I'm especially interested in how the political battles are going to go between Ghoul, now that he's back in space after his traumatic experiences, Shadiq, who has usurped his company and is playing his own game for his own selfish ends, and then Prospera, who admittedly has Suletta on puppet strings, that Suletta doesn't mind being on because she loves her mommy, though in a way that gives off serious Winter Soldier vibes, and Miarina is also on puppet strings, though she doesn't quite realize it. Now, I personally expect this show to possibly go another season, if not 2, of 12 episodes, which would bring it around the 48 episode mark once it's all said and done. I have a feeling we're not going to get the entire details of what Quiet Zero truly is or how it's going to be accomplished until much later. We have a general idea of what it is, but we're not quite 100% sure on all the details. But then again, this is assuming that my prediction about the series length is going to be correct. If I'm not correct, and this is the last season of the show, the next episodes are going to move at a breakneck pace, and the overall pace of the series is going to feel wonky as fuck, because the first season was pretty slow at points. Then again, the other mecha series that the writer has done before this one, aside from Code Geass, were only 24 episodes. So we'll see. Ultimately, though, my prediction, and I've been pretty spot on with my predictions up to this point, is that there's going to be consistent conflict between Suletta and Miorina, because Miorina is going to be struggling with those puppet strings that I mentioned. Whereas Suletta is going to be completely comfortable there, and Miorina is going to want to cut the strings. And the motivation for that struggle is going to be at the end because Miorina is going to want her friend back from Prospera. Because she realizes that despite how bitchy she acted towards Suletta throughout the entire first season, Suletta was always a sweetheart to her and always wanted to protect her. Reason being is because that's what friends do. At the end, I honestly think that Quiet Zero is still going to go through. And everyone's going to die in a really depressing ending that invokes Space Runaway Ideon and the end of Evangelion. Granted, end of Evangelion pulled a lot from Ideon because Hideaki Anno was a massive Tamino fan. Tamino made both Gundam and Ideon, etc., etc. But speaking of Tamino, the writer of the series, Ichiro Okuchiki, actually worked with Tamino on Turn A, plus he did the novelization of the 08MS team. So he's a Gundam veteran. And he made 08MS team way fucking darker. You know the character Kiki Rosita, who the worst thing that happened to her was her father died in that series? Yeah, funny thing, Ichiro Okuchiki had her gang raped. Yeah. Little, it's a little much there, buddy. went a little dark there. Ugh. Anyway, that's part of the reason I think that this is going to be bad end. Still, let's say that there's a good ending. My thought is that either Suletta or Miorina is going to end up hitched to Ghoul. One of them, I think, is going to die. And then whoever didn't die is going to live happily ever after, because Japan doesn't give a flying fuck about your Tumblr fantasies because there's 0 lesbians in this show. Which brings us to part 2 of this video. Dolphin and Whale. Do you folks remember the episode of South Park called Whale Whores? The episode where the Japanese went around killing dolphins and whales? You know, dolphin and whale? That one. One of my favorite episodes. And the whole episode exists to take the piss out of the show Whale Wars, because Whale Wars was boring as hell. Thing is, at the end of it, the Japanese are told by Stan that it wasn't a dolphin and a whale that dropped nukes on Japan. They photoshopped a photo so that it's a chicken and a cow. Well, when the Japanese whalers start killing chickens and cows, Randy Marsh looks at Stan at the very end before the credits roll and says, "See, Stan, now they're just like the rest of us." Which is funny. But the Japanese in that episode are meant to be exaggerated and kind of goofy because Matt Stone and Trey Parker are more than willing to take the piss out of everybody. That's part of the beauty of South Park, even to this day. Still, I get the feeling that there's a section of the modern-day populace here in the West that actually sees the Japanese as backwards people that need to be properly educated. This actually goes into a cultural divide that we're starting to see between the Japanese and those of us in the West. And I will warn you that this does kind of delve into some political stuff, so fair warning. The Witch from Mercury, like I said, features 0 lesbian romances. 0. In fact, there's no indication that Suletta and Miorina are attracted to one another that way. The only romantic interest that's been put towards Suletta, if you go back and you actually pay attention to the whole series, and you take off the rainbow-colored glasses for 10 seconds, is the character of Ellen Saris, who has been fascinated with her since the start of the show. By the way, Ellen's a guy. Now, I don't think the two are going to become an item, because Ellen is out for his own skin and his own interests, because he's kind of evil, but that's basically all we've seen. The only other talk of dating in the show happened early on, and it was about Suletta dating boys. Miorina even called her sex-crazed in disgust, and has treated their union, quote-unquote, with nothing more than disdain, because she doesn't see Suletta that way. It's almost like people need to be picking up on some cues here, but this is what happens when your media literacy is 0. Now, I imagine that some very angry people on Twitter or Reddit with 40 pronouns in their bios and a search history that would land them 20 years in a federal prison will say that I'm wrong. Now, if you press them on how I'm wrong, you'll notice that they won't be able to cite a specific interest that's even quasi-romantic. Heck, if they show up in the comments, feel free to do so. Because you're going to notice something. The ones that try to make a reference to something will fall apart under scrutiny. And then the ones that don't will just tell you to educate yourself or say that it's obvious. Here's the thing. If something is obvious, then it's easy to point to. It doesn't take too long to point to one specific thing and say, here, it's obvious, it's right there. If you can't use that pointer finger or you're not willing to do so, it's because it's not there, you're lying, and you're trying to push something onto people by lying. And beyond any political ramifications, that's evil because it's a lie. Don't do that. The progressive weirdos on the internet have consistently tried to make it out that these two underage, I need to emphasize that, girls are in a romantic and or sexual relationship with one another. By the way, if you're focusing on the sexual part, they're underage. Go to jail. Go to jail right now. Stay away from children. You sick fuck. The obsession is kind of weird, to the point where there were people on Reddit trying to claim that Gundam becoming the most profitable anime in the world was due to lesbians in The Witch from Mercury, even though, A, again, there's no lesbians, and B, the high point of being the most profitable anime in the world was reached prior to the series even being announced. Seriously, learn how fiscal quarters work, you fucking simpletons. Thing is, this is being pushed because these lunatic progressives on the internet want it to be something that it isn't. Not because it's actually there. There have been several progressive writers from progressive rags such as Pride, Gizmodo, Game Rant, comicbook.com, and others that have written entire articles on the subject, but the arguments, again, under scrutiny, are just hollow and boil down to this. This idea of these two girls were forced into an arranged marriage by a dueling system, and therefore they now somehow love each other even though there's no indication of any sort of physical, sexual, or whatever attraction. Now, that argument is obviously pretty shit, which is why I'm making fun of it. And what's funny about it is that, from what I've gathered from Japanese Twitter, the Japanese don't see it that way and are not fans of the interpretation. What these progressives fail to realize is that The Witch from Mercury is not written by Neil Druckmann. It's written by Ichiro Okuchi, the same guy who wrote Valkyrie of the Liberator, M3 the Dark Metal, and Code Geass, all of which are dark as hell. The reason I bring this up is because Neil Druckmann is a shit writer who doesn't understand how to properly tell a story, instead focusing too much on being properly politically progressive instead of making sure that the storyline even makes sense with the narrative themes he's trying to present. Just as a quick note, anytime I talk about writers that focus too much on political correctness and political brownie points and not enough on creative consistency, Neil Druckmann is literally the prime example of everything wrong with modern writing. That's for another video, though. Thing is, these goofy progressives on Twitter, or the writers for these garbage leftist rags who are poorly cosplaying as journalists, want this to be Gundam's version of The Last of Us 2. They want stories like the way Neil Druckmann tells them, because these people don't really want stories. They want media like this to be quote-unquote queer media because it's supposedly going to change the culture. Even though Gundam is not from the Western culture, you tits. Now, doing these things actually hasn't changed Western culture at all in any positive way. If anything, it makes our society 10 times more contentious because a bunch of weirdos are getting more say than people who actually care about the entertainment and spend money on it. Not to mention they're trying to push this stuff on kids. Which, by the way, if you're trying to push things that have to do with sex on children, you can go to jail too. You can go to jail right now. You see the thing, go to jail. One thing I will say is that a lot of these goofs got scared away by Suletta's method of creating my favorite condiment for French fries. But there's still some out there that are trying to push the nonsense because progressives largely see the Japanese as subhumans. I don't know if I'm the one who coined the term or if someone else beat me to it, but what the progressives want to do is essentially what I call cultural imperialism. In essence, they're looking to culturally colonize Japan for the Western political left so it adheres to the Western political zeitgeist. And it's not just with anime. Video game writers, video game quote-unquote journalists like Laura Kate Dale and Cece Zhang of Kotaku have written several articles essentially condemning Japanese media for not being appropriately sensitive to their progressive beliefs, even though progressive media will get on you for quote-unquote cultural appropriation if you interact with and share the culture of other nations. No, the beliefs don't make any sense. I'm fully aware that it's fucking stupid to 1 minute act like other cultures are sacred and should be kept separate and considered sacred, and then another minute act like it needs to be overwritten like a new copy of a JPEG file. These aren't nice people, folks. Thing is, it's not just the media that's doing this. One particular Western politician, former Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, and no, I didn't like him. In fact, a lot of people here in Illinois don't like him, who is currently our ambassador to Japan, is essentially cramming the same queer progressivism onto the Japanese with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer through a pane of glass. Now, the Japanese aren't buying it. And on social media, if you translate tweets, you'll see a lot of them telling him to fuck off. In fact, let me give a quick message to our friends in Japan, and hopefully I don't butcher this. I'm pretty new to speaking Japanese. Here we go. Konnichiwa, Nihon. Watashi wa Micah desu. Rahm Emanuel wa baka. Kare o mushi suru. Sayonara. But it all adds up to the same thing. Cultural imperialism. Japan must be culturally conquered and made a cultural colony in the name of the empire of woke. To these idiots, there can be no other way. But then again, that's why they're idiots. In fact, some of them, I would say, are flat out racist towards the Japanese. CC Zhang definitely is. Thing is, the Japanese are very proud of their culture. They're also very protective of it as well, as they have the right to be. At the end of the day, they don't have to have the same attitudes towards same-sex relationships that we do. And to be honest with you, I don't think anyone should expect a nation with a birth rate problem to see a relationship that doesn't bear children as anything else but a waste of time. Heck, the correlation between the terms yuri, which is what's constantly thrown onto the series, and lesbianism in Japan isn't what you think it is. In fact, the Japanese don't see the two terms as synonymous with one another anymore. They haven't for years. The term yuri in Japan, when it comes to lesbianism, is synonymous with lesbian porn, not social dynamics and relationships. By the way, actual lesbians in Japan don't like their media or anything associated with it to be called yuri or associated with that term. But this is where we're at. My fear as someone who has an appreciation for Japan and its culture is that this sort of thing is going to persist, and the Japanese are going to think we're all these Twitter freaks and stupid journalists and politicians. We're not. But it's not going to stop the media from trying. It's not going to stop the politicians from trying. And fuck every single one of them for doing so and pushing this nonsense onto other people. I'd much rather Japan remain Japan, because Japan seems pretty cool. If you can't get behind these folks making their own art reflective of their own culture, well, fuck off and go watch more Owl House. Oh, wait. Owl House got canceled. If you enjoyed this video, I want to thank you all so much for watching. Please do not forget to hit like and subscribe. Also, if you like comic books and novellas, I have got the hookup. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody who backed American Monsters, the genesis of Project Lazarus. We got double the amount we needed to actually make this book happen, so thank you so much for that. There's still a little bit of time to grab it if you want to. Keep in mind, the digital version is only $9, so is the paperback, but of course, that has to be shipped to you. But on top of that, 3 Nights, 4 Days Part 2 is also on Indiegogo. That is being worked on as we speak. In fact, we're about to get an alternate cover for it. And it is a horror comic book that is very much inspired by Berserk. So if you're a Berserk fan, you'll enjoy it. If you missed out on the first book, you can get books 1 and 2 in a bundle if you would like. And then finally, the one that I'm super proud of, that I'm getting to do with my friends over at Graded Point 5, The Saint and Peregrine, Dark Knight in the Windy City. The crossover between these two indie superheroes is happening. We have got a mailing list up right now. Go sign up for it. Signing up for the mailing list is free. Not to mention, if you sign up for this particular mailing list, you'll have the opportunity of getting a tier of both covers that we're going to have, or one or the other, as virgin covers. On top of that, everybody who signs up for the mailing list and ends up backing the book at any physical tier, you're going to get that print thrown in, even if you don't get the virgin covers. So sign up, you get free stuff if you do. On that note, guys, once again, I want to thank you all so much for watching. My name is Big Micah C. Have yourselves a great rest of your day.